Hi, everybody. I want to just give a quick presentation on using chat in Zoom. At this point for our third speech, you should have it all outlined and pretty much ready to go. So it's a good idea or a good time now to add in the chat elements. So let me share the screen and open a presentation with you. Okay. So using the chat, bringing in your audience. The idea with chat is that it can help build engagement. That's the whole reason to use it in your presentations. And that comes down to thinking about completing this base communication unit, as we've talked about in the past. It helps for you as the presenter using chat to complete the unit because you can get feedback from how your audience is understanding your presentation while it's happening. It helps the audience because they're able to send out some clarifying things for themselves so they complete their base units. The critical part of this is that as the presenter, you use it in a genuine fashion and that you refer back to what content or what information is discussed in the chat in your presentation. So in other words, you can't just ask a question about something in the chat and then never reference the answers that the audience gave you, or they'll feel disenfranchised from you. Okay, so, all right. So we've been talking about our presentations from the perspective of structuring it around the introduction and the hook, the body, and then the conclusion. And so we'll talk about using chat in the same way. So in the hook, you can use chat for sharing experiences so that you can, like your hook, if it's a personal story, you can ask them, the audience, to describe a similar story or experience that they had, and then refer back to it in your presentation as you go. Because it's a similar story, it shouldn't be too hard to make some references back to it. You can also use that if it's a larger Zoom setting, not like our classroom one, but like a work session where a new team is getting together, to have everybody give quick introductions of like who they are and where they're from and things like that. Other things the chats can do is add resources for your audience to look up later, and then also, point them in ways to continue the conversation after the presentation's open. Those two are not ones you would generally use too much in the hook. You would, however, use sharing resources a lot in the body. You could, if you give out some good information, you could point them to the web page where you got it so they could follow up with it. To a lesser extent, you might ask them to share some experiences about different points that you make, but not too much at this point. It's mostly going to be about sharing resources in the body of the presentation. And then finally, in the conclusion, there should be no new information being presented in a conclusion ever, because it's wrapping up everything that's already been done. And so the same for the chat. You don't want to have them, you don't want the chat in the conclusion to introduce new information about your topic. But what you can do in that chat is share ways in which to continue the conversation about the topic. So that might be like, hey, and here's my blog that talks more about it, or here, this organization has an amazing Facebook group page that you might want to follow if you're interested in this topic, or something like that. And then you put the link to that spot in the chat. Okay, so that's where you use chats in the presentation. Just real quickly, some potential issues that can go wrong with chats. If you ask too good of a question about personal experiences and you have a really outgoing audience, they're going to just spend the whole time in the chat talking about their experiences. So you have to be willing and able to sort of pull people back away from the chat and back to you and be like, hey, okay, that's really good. Those are great in your chats. Now, here, I got a few more things to tell you, something like that. Then they can also distract the presenter. You can spend so much time reading the chats that you don't get to your presentation, or your presentation takes longer than you anticipated. So, plan out how long you're willing to engage in those chats, and then move on from them when you're supposed to. And then the last thing is that you won't get any responses in the chat box. This generally happens when you initially start asking for things in the chat and then you never refer back to it. People just give up. They're like, they're not really using it. And so they don't use it. Okie doke. Last thing, where is the chat on Zoom? So if you hover your mouse over the bottom of the Zoom screen, as kind of you can see where mine is in that image, a bottom toolbar will open up and there's a little chat icon there. And you just click on that link and that'll open up that sidebar that you see there. And then you can type in your message in the bottom. Do notice that you can type it into everyone or particular participants in the meeting. So just be aware of that it's going to everyone if you want it to go to everyone, and an individual if you want it to go to an individual. Okay, I think that will wrap up the Zoom chat video. Talk to you all later.